I'm gonna read a poem and then an excerpt from my novel.
Woo.
Before I was a cashier at a grocery store, I was a paleontologist. And this poem is called Faggot Dinosaur. It's hard to believe there's anything left to be found on this karate-chopped, wrung-out planet. And just as I say this, beachcombing lovers pick up shards of china from sunken ships. Old hunched men pass metal detectors over rich dirt, and a 7-year-old digs up the humble jawbone of the sweetest dinosaur that ever lived. The dinosaur was a meat-eating juvenile, but I pretend he was a cardigan-wearing painter, an effeminate faggot dinosaur, a friend, and that I lived with him in a time where dinosaurs could be faggots, and faggots missing links, when people weren't assholes because there weren't any people. This is from a novel that I'm writing called Cha-Ching. My jerk-faced boss called everyone and everything, "You fucking faggot." The faggot could be his brother, a pen, or the price of a semiconductor. My job was to sit in a windowless room and catch the rainfall of faxes he dropped through a hole cut in the wall that separated my office from his. The faxes were pages of numerical codes for semiconductors and their prices. I entered them into a prehistoric computer where an archaic green cursor flashed despondently. My desk was covered in stacks of these faxes, thick like phone books, and all day I'd move through them. Whatever I didn't finish by day's end would be thrown out, my work obsolete because their prices changed daily. I kept a list of how many times I heard my boss say, "You fucking faggot," and filled a pad with tiny hash marks. The only good thing about my job was I could smoke in my office and have my very own ashtray. I pretended to be Nawal el-Saadawi, scrolling down the details of my grim existence, and penned my groundbreaking poem called "How Data Entry Can Make You an Alcoholic." The only other good thing that happened at this job was once a week a sales rep would bring a pink box of donuts to our office, and I'd sneak into the break room after a trip to the bathroom, hunch over the box, and cram as many as possible into my mouth. The insane bookkeeper who only wore nylon sweatsuits, so whenever she walked, you'd hear the swooshing sound of 2 plastic bags rubbing together. On Fridays, her husband came to get her, and he wore the men's version of her sweatsuit. Both sweatsuits seemed ironed, with creases down the front of each leg. They were in a same sweatsuit relationship. The bookkeeper split her time between going out of her way to pay the company bills late and writing fraudulent complaint letters to the squeaky dog toy company where she bought toys for her white Yorkie with omnipresent eye boogers. She confided in me that every few years she wrote the dog toy company demanding compensation for her dog that had almost choked to death on one of their faulty toys. In a few weeks, she'd receive a huge cardboard box of new dog toys from the company. She was adamant none of the company's bills get paid before the due date, so she threw out all the pre-printed envelopes enclosed with each bill that had barcodes to allow the post office to process the payment speedily. Instead, she placed each check in a plain envelope with a handwritten address. My life was sad in Yonkers, my days spent doing data entry and my nights and weekends spent as a clerk at a pet supply store teaching 16-year-old co-workers how to count back change. Rorschach was a puppy, and after each workday, I'd take her to the park for extended walks. Her legs were growing faster than her body, and she started to look like one of those jacked-up pickup trucks. Once we were out for our last walk of the night, and a man stepped suddenly out from the shadows and blocked the path in front of us. It's hard to know if he was going to attack, but she barked twice firmly, warning him. Even though she was still a puppy, the man turned quickly away, afraid, and went in the other direction. After that night, I understood more deeply why my female friends wanted to borrow Rorschach whenever they went running after sundown. A person gets sick of being robbed, just like they get sick of anything else. Right before I moved to New York, I had the terrible luck of being in 2 restaurant robberies in the same month and having some kids throw a beer bottle at my head as I walked down the street holding hands with my girlfriend. I'd lived in Yonkers a few months when some girls I'd been arrested with in San Francisco invited me to a potluck. I was happy to get out of my house where I was starting to find out why my room only cost $300. The leaseholder was an unemployed mooch who increased the price of all the rooms in the house until her part of the rent was covered. Her small room off the kitchen with only a curtain for a door was originally a pantry that she'd converted into a den in which to smoke cigarettes and watch sports all day. When I made any of my many bowls of oatmeal throughout the day, I'd hear her cheering for or against a team through the curtain. I tried to avoid her because she'd always ask me for rides or to lend her money so she could go to 7-Eleven and buy Tang. Her best friend also lived in our house across the hall from me, where she kept millions of rabbits in cages. The friend worked at a bank, dated a bunch of non-committal men with shellacked hair, and read self-help books about dating non-committal men with shellacked hair. One day her car broke down and she devised a plan to go to a Saturn dealership on a rainy night with the mooch leaseholder and slip in their parking lot. She was convinced she could get a free car out of it. These were my roommates. The night I decided to go to the potluck, I felt guilty leaving Rorschach at home after working all day, but I desperately needed to get out of Yonkers. I brought a $6 bottle of wine even though I wasn't drinking. It was dark when I arrived at my friend's apartment, and I felt small in the shadows of the tall buildings in the Lower East Side. I rang their doorbell from a gate on the street and waited to be buzzed into the lobby. The first gate opened, and then I pushed through the buzzing lobby door. As soon as I stepped into the apartment building, I had the feeling someone was behind me, and when I turned around, a short junkie was pointing a knife at my stomach. "Give me your money or I'm going to stab you," he said. "Money," I said incredulously. I had $3 in my pocket and a brown bag with a $6 bottle of wine. I heard myself repeat, "Money." The last 3 months of going on dates with guys from the dog park and eating 30-cent rolls from the supermarket flipped through my brain. Money? I could help him get elected president more easily than give him money. He stepped closer and touched the point of the knife blade to my stomach. "Give me your money or I'm going to stab you," he said, this time his voice quieter. Despite all this, something told me he was an amateur by the way he held the knife flimsily, like it was the edge of a frisbee. My adrenaline turned to outrage when I realized I'd found myself in the middle of another robbery, and I wrapped my fingers around the neck of the wine bottle and began to swing it at his head. You can kill a person by hitting them in the head with a bottle. You can smash their skull. Thanks.